The lawyer's words still ring in my ears. Mrs. Helen Parker, your husband left everything, $35 million, to your daughter-in-law, Jessica. In that moment, my whole world collapsed. After 40 years of building a family, I was thrown out of the house I had scrubbed, painted, and filled with love. But fate has a strange way of turning. Because only 3 days later, the same woman who humiliated me stood at my door, crying, begging for my help. Before I tell you the whole story, I'd love to know, where are you listening from? And if family stories like this touch your heart, please subscribe so you don't miss a single part. I never thought the day would come when I would be treated like a stranger in my own family. For 40 years, that old house on Maple Street had been my life. George and I built it board by board, painting the walls together, raising our only son, David, under its roof. Every memory of love and sacrifice lived inside those walls. But when George died, I learned that love doesn't always last and sacrifice doesn't always mean anything. The day of the will reading, I sat in the lawyer's office, my black dress still smelling faintly of lilies from the funeral. My hands clutched a tissue I had been twisting since morning. David sat beside me, quiet, his arm draped around his wife, Jessica. She wore a sleek black suit, her lipstick fresh, her eyes dry. I expected the usual. The house, the savings, maybe a few accounts. Nothing grand, but enough to keep me safe in my old age. The lawyer cleared his throat. His voice was steady, detached. I, George Parker, leave the entirety of my estate, valued at $35 million, to my daughter-in-law, Jessica Parker. The words hung in the air like smoke. I blinked, sure I had misheard. I'm sorry, what? The lawyer didn't repeat himself. He just pushed the papers across the table. Jessica's lips curled into the faintest smile. She reached out and slid the folder closer, as though she had been waiting for it all along. I turned to David, desperate for him to say something, anything. He only looked down at the table. George would never, my voice broke. He would never leave me with nothing. Jessica finally spoke, her tone smooth as silk. Don't take it personally, Helen. George trusted me. He knew I'd carry the family forward. You've had your time. Now it's mine. Her words cut deeper than the will itself. You've had your time. I sat frozen, the room spinning. My whole marriage, my whole life had been erased with a single sentence. That evening when I returned home, the movers were already there. Jessica directed them like a queen ruling her court. Boxes labeled Helen were stacked by the door. What is this? I demanded. She didn't flinch. You can't stay here anymore. The house is mine now. Don't worry, I arranged a small apartment on Pine Street. Consider it a kindness. A kindness. I wanted to scream, but the fight drained out of me. George was gone, my son silent, and Jessica smiling like she had already won. That night, I sat alone in the living room. The walls that had heard David's first words, the fireplace George and I had built stone by stone, all of it was slipping through my fingers. I whispered into the silence, George, why? But the house gave no answer. The next morning, the locks were changed. I stood on the porch with a single suitcase, neighbors watching from their windows as though I carried a disease. At 63, I was homeless. Not by poverty. Not by fate. But by my own family. Before I go further, let me pause here. Where are you listening from? A small town like mine, or maybe somewhere far away? Tell me in the comments, I'd love to know. And if family stories like this touch your heart, please subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Because the story is only beginning. 3 days later, the same daughter-in-law who threw me out came crawling back, begging for my help. And what she told me changed everything. The apartment on Pine Street smelled of mildew and dust. 4 walls, 1 window that faced a brick wall, and a faucet that dripped all night. That was all I had left. The mover set down my suitcase, muttered a quick goodbye, and left. When the door shut, silence filled the room so thick it pressed against my chest. I walked slowly, touching the peeling paint, the cracked linoleum. It felt like a cage. After 40 years in the Maple Street house, this place felt more like punishment than home. I unpacked what little Jessica had allowed me to keep. A few dresses, some dishes, and the wedding photo of George and me. I placed it on the bedside table. His smile seemed almost cruel now, promises of forever, trapped behind glass. That first night, I lay on the thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. Every sound carried through the walls. The neighbor's TV, a couple arguing, a baby crying. My old house had creaked too, but it was my creak. My sound. This was foreign, empty. And Jessica's words wouldn't leave me. You've had your time. On the second day I tried to make the place feel less hollow. I hung the curtains I'd brought, though they were too long, and brushed the dirty floor. I boiled oatmeal, but it tasted of metal from the dented pot. I sat with my coffee and stared at the empty chair across from me. George's chair. For 40 years he'd sat across from me each morning, reading the paper, sipping black coffee. I could almost hear the rustle of the pages. But the chair stayed empty. Memories flooded back. George and I painting the nursery when I was just 23, my belly heavy with David. George promising, "We'll build everything for him, Helen. He'll never know struggle." We kept that promise. George worked double shifts at the factory, I cleaned houses. Every dime we saved went into Maple Street. The swing set in the yard, the rose bushes along the fence, the creaking staircase. All of it was built by our hands. And yet, after everything, it was Jessica who now walked those halls. That evening, I forced myself to walk to the grocery store. Neighbors whispered when I passed. "That's Helen Parker," I heard one murmur. "Her husband left everything to the daughter-in-law," another replied. I kept my head high, but their words clung to me like burrs. At the counter, Mrs. Jensen, who had shared coffee with me for 30 years, looked away instead of meeting my eyes. I bought bread, butter, and jam. Essentials. Keep. For the first time in decades, I worried how long my money would last. That night, I lit a single candle and sat alone at the table. I whispered into the flickering light, "George, why? Why would you leave me with nothing?" The flame flickered but gave no answer. My sobs filled the silence until my chest ached. On the third day I couldn't resist. I walked past Maple Street. The house looked just as it always had, roses blooming, windows polished. Through the curtains I saw movement, strangers laughing in the rooms I had once scrubbed until my hands bled. And then Jessica. She stood on the porch, her phone pressed to her ear. But she wasn't smiling. Her face was pale, frantic. Her free hand clutched the railing so tightly her knuckles whitened. Her voice carried across the quiet street. "No, you don't understand. They took everything. All of it. 35 million. It's gone." I froze behind the fence, my breath caught in my throat. The woman who had stolen my home, my dignity, my husband's legacy, was unraveling before my eyes. And though part of me wanted to feel satisfaction, all I felt was dread. Because whatever storm had taken her fortune in 3 short days was heading straight for me too. The knock came just after sunrise on the 4th day. Sharp, urgent, echoing through the tiny Pine Street apartment. I hesitated. No one ever visited me here. When I opened the door, my breath caught. Jessica. Her perfect hair was tangled, her makeup smeared. The confident smile she'd worn at the lawyer's office was gone. Her eyes were red, her hands shaking as they clutched a designer bag like it was her last possession. "Helen," she whispered, her voice raw. "Please. I need your help." I almost laughed at the absurdity. My help? This was the woman who had stolen my house, my security, my dignity. Who had told me, "You've had your time." Now she stood on my doorstep like a beggar. Every instinct told me to slam the door. But something in her eyes, fear, desperation, stopped me. Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. "Come in." She collapsed into the wobbly chair, burying her face in her hands. "It's gone," she sobbed. "All of it. 35 million, vanished overnight." I stared at her, hardly able to process the words. "Gone? How?" Jessica's voice trembled. "An investment. A friend of David's, Michael Reed, said it was guaranteed. Safe. He told me George trusted him once. I believed him. I signed everything over." She looked up, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "And now he's gone. Accounts empty. Phone disconnected. Just gone." I sank into the chair across from her, the old wood creaking. $35 million. Vanished like smoke. "You gave him everything?" I asked quietly. Her voice cracked. "I just wanted to prove I was worthy. That I could handle it. But I was stupid. Greedy. No. David won't even look at me." For a moment I wanted to scream at her. To remind her she had thrown me into this apartment while she lived like a queen. But I stayed silent. She reached across the table suddenly, grabbing my hand, her nails digging into my skin. "Please, Helen. You're the only one who can help me. People respect you. They trust you. I can't face this alone." I pulled my hand back, my chest burning. "Why should I help you? After everything you've done to me. Her lips trembled. Because without you, I have no one. Her words twisted in me sharp as glass. 4 years I had been erased. By George's will, by my own son's silence, by Jessica's arrogance. And now here she was, stripped of everything, turning to me. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the brick wall loomed, trapping the light. Jessica had humiliated me, but she had also been used. She was young, naive, easily led. George had once warned me about Michael Reed, said he was dangerous, a man who ruined lives. And now his name had returned. I pressed my hand to the cold glass and whispered to myself, maybe George didn't betray me after all. Maybe someone else did. When I turned back, Jessica was watching me, her face streaked with tears. You can stay here tonight, I said finally. But only tonight. Tomorrow we'll decide what comes next. She nodded quickly, relief flooding her face. Thank you. I won't forget this. I didn't answer. Because I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing it for George. For David. For myself. That night, as Jessica lay restless in the spare room, I sat by the candle with George's photo. His steady eyes stared back at me as if urging me forward. Whoever did this, I whispered, whoever forged that will and destroyed our family, I'll find them. Because now, the woman who had taken everything from me was at my table, begging. And that meant the balance of power had shifted. At last it was my turn. Jessica barely touched her coffee the next morning. She sat at the table, staring into the dark liquid as if the answer to her problems might appear there. I still don't understand, she said finally. Why would George leave it all to me? We hardly spoke. It never made sense. Her words echoed what had haunted me since the will reading. George had been careful, meticulous, never reckless with money. Why would he risk everything on a daughter-in-law he barely knew? Maybe he didn't, I murmured. Jessica frowned. What do you mean? I stood and grabbed my coat. Stay here. I need to see something for myself. The lawyer's office smelled of leather and dust, the same as it had on the day that shattered my life. Mr. Dalton looked surprised to see me. Mrs. Parker, he said, rising. I thought everything had been settled. I want to see the will again, I said, my voice steady. He hesitated, then pulled the folder from his cabinet. The same words glared up at me. The entirety of my estate to my daughter-in-law, Jessica Parker. But my eyes weren't on the words this time. They were on the signature. George's name sat at the bottom in bold ink. It looked right at first glance. But after 40 years of seeing him sign checks, birthday cards, love notes, I knew. The G was too sharp, the P too perfect. George's hand always curved softly, even when angry. This wasn't his. This isn't my husband's writing, I whispered. Dalton stiffened. Mrs. Parker, are you suggesting forgery? These documents were notarized. I don't care if the governor himself notarized them, I snapped. This isn't George's hand. He looked at me cautiously. If you're wrong, this could cause you trouble. I'm not wrong, I said and walked out with my heart pounding. When I returned to Pine Street, Jessica was pacing the floor, her phone buzzing unanswered in her hand. What did you find? She asked, eyes wide. I stared at her for a long moment, then lied. Nothing yet. Her shoulders slumped. David won't answer me. He's avoiding me. Helen, I think he blames me for everything. Her voice broke and she sank into the chair. But my mind was racing. David hadn't looked surprised when the will was read. He hadn't protested. He had just sat there, silent, as if he already knew. And now Michael Reed's name was tangled in this mess. Someone George had once warned me about. Pieces of the puzzle were shifting into place, and the picture they formed made my stomach turn. That evening I walked back to Maple Street. The sight of the house still sliced through me like glass. My roses bloomed along the fence, though no one cared for them now. David opened the door before I knocked. His face was drawn, tired, but his eyes were hard. Mom, he said flatly. You shouldn't be here. I forced myself to hold his gaze. I need to ask you something. Did you know about the will before the reading? He stiffened. Of course not. Don't lie to me, David. You didn't look surprised. You just sat there as if you expected it. He looked away. Dad told me. The words made my knees weak. Told you what? That it would all go to Jessica. He said she was smart, that she could handle it better than you or me. He said, David swallowed. He said you'd had your time. The phrase. The exact words Jessica had thrown at me. I shook my head. That doesn't sound like your father. David's jaw tightened. Maybe you didn't know him as well as you thought. Anger rose hot in my chest. That will wasn't his signature. Someone forged it. And if you had anything to do with it. Stop. David snapped, his voice cracking. He ran a hand through his hair, his shoulders sagging. You don't understand the pressure, Mom. Jessica was supposed to make us stronger. But now, she's ruined everything. I stared at him, my heart breaking. Not just for George but for the son who stood before me, a man I no longer recognized. When I turned to leave, David called after me, his voice low. Be careful, Mom. You're digging in places that will get you hurt. That night, back in Pine Street, Jessica whispered, What did he say? I sat heavily, staring at George's photo. Enough to know this isn't over. Someone forged that will. David isn't innocent. Jessica covered her mouth, tears spilling. I reached across the table, this time taking her hand. My voice was steel. We're going to find the truth. No matter what it costs. Jessica barely ate that day. She sat by the window, staring out at the brick wall, twisting her wedding ring like it burned her skin. What if David knew? She whispered. What if this wasn't just Michael's scam? The thought had been circling my mind since last night. George's forged signature. David's silence. Michael Reed's sudden appearance. The pieces fit too well. We need proof, I said. Not guesses. Proof. The next morning, we went to Michael Reed's last known office downtown. The building was shabby, its sign, Reed Financial, hanging crooked on rusted nails. The door was unlocked. Inside, desks were overturned, papers scattered. It looked less like someone moved out and more like someone had fled in a hurry. Jessica rifled through the debris. Nothing. It's all shredded. I searched the desk drawers, my heart pounding. Most were empty, but wedged in the back of one I found a single envelope. It was addressed to D. Parker. Jessica gasped as I opened it. Inside was a note, scrawled in hurried script. Your father's trust is safe. Jessica won't question it. By the time she realizes, we'll both be gone. My knees nearly buckled. I gripped the desk, the paper trembling in my hands. Jessica snatched it, her face paling. This proves it. David was working with him. The words blurred through my tears. My son, George's son, had helped steal everything. We left the office in silence, the city rushing around us, indifferent to the storm tearing through my life. On the bus ride back, Jessica finally spoke. Her voice was hollow. Do you think David ever loved me? Or was I just part of the plan? I turned to her, my throat tight. I don't know. But I do know this. George didn't betray us. David did. Jessica covered her mouth, shaking. Helen, what do we do now? I looked out the window, clutching the envelope like a weapon. We find someone who can't be bought. Someone who'll help us bring the truth into the light. That night, I placed the letter beside George's photo on the nightstand. His eyes, steady even in the faded picture, seemed to watch me. I'll make them answer, I whispered. For you. For all of us. Because now I wasn't just grieving. I was fighting. The next morning, Jessica spread the letter on the table like a confession. The ink glared back at us. Your father's trust is safe. By the time she realizes, we'll both be gone. She whispered, David and Michael, they used me. I was never meant to keep the money. Her voice trembled, but mine was steady. Then we find someone who will believe us. Someone outside their reach. I thought of Laura Briggs. Years ago she had been a detective, sharp, relentless. She'd chased corruption until it destroyed her career. The Turners made sure of that. But I remembered the fire in her eyes, the way she swore truth mattered more than survival. She's still out on Miller Road, I told Jessica. If anyone will listen, it's her. Jessica nodded, clutching the letter like a lifeline. The ranch sat low against the horizon, horses grazing in the field. Laura met us at the gate, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes still cutting. I heard about George, she said flatly. I'm sorry. I held out the letter. This proves the will was forged. My son and Michael Reed worked together. She read quickly, her jaw tightening. Then she glanced up. You realize what you're stirring, Helen? The Turners don't just cheat. They bury people. Jessica's voice cracked. They already buried me. I have nothing left to lose. Laura led us inside. Her kitchen table was covered in dusty files. Old photos, bank transfers, scribbled notes. They thought they ended me, she said, spreading papers across the table. But I kept everything. Property deeds, shell companies, payoffs to judges. They hide well, but patterns always show. She tapped the letter. This ties your son to Reed. If we link it to Turner accounts, we've got leverage. Jessica leaned forward. So what do we do? Laura's eyes narrowed. Gather more. Fast. Then take it to the state attorney, not local cops. They're all on Turner's leash. We left the ranch as the sun dipped low. At the end of the dirt road, a black car sat idling. Tinted windows, engine humming, no driver in sight. Jessica's hand gripped my arm. Helen, they're watching us. The car didn't move, but the weight of its presence followed us all the way back to Pine Street. That night the phone rang. Jessica answered first, her voice shaking. She listened only a moment before thrusting it to me, her face white. A man's voice slid through the line, calm, mocking. You should have stayed quiet, Helen. Graves are deep in this town. And there's always room for one more Parker. The line clicked dead. Jessica covered her mouth, tears in her eyes. I set the receiver down slowly, my heart pounding, but not with fear this time. With fury. They think they can scare me, I whispered to George's photo on the nightstand. But they've already taken everything. I have nothing left to lose. And that made me dangerous. The morning after the phone call, the town already felt different. At the bakery where I'd bought bread every Saturday for 20 years, Mrs. Green barely looked at me. She slid the loaf across the counter like my touch might stain her. Behind me, two women whispered, their voices sharp enough to cut. That's her. The widow who lost everything. Her son wants nothing to do with her now. I kept my head high, but every word clung to me. By the time I reached Pine Street, a letter was waiting in the mailbox. The paper was thick, the handwriting neat. Meddle again and you'll bury her. I didn't need to ask who her meant. Jessica sat pale at the table when I showed her. Her fingers twisted the paper until it tore. They're turning everyone against us. We can't fight this. Yes, we can, I said firmly. That's what they want, to make us afraid, isolated. But Laura has records. And now we have proof against David and Reed. If we move quickly. She cut me off, tears brimming. Helen, David hasn't come home. He's shutting me out completely. Do you know what that means? I did. It meant he had chosen his side. That evening, Samuel, the quiet man who once worked at George's factory, knocked on my door. He looked uneasy, glancing over his shoulder before stepping in. I heard things, he said softly. The Turners are moving money. They know someone's digging. Helen, you're walking on fire. I showed him the letter. His jaw clenched. Then you don't have much time. Later Laura arrived, her arms full of folders. She spread them across the table. Bank transfers, land deals, names of judges and officers. This is bigger than we thought, she said grimly. The Turners launder through half the businesses in this town. But if we tie Reed and David into one of these accounts, it'll collapse the whole tower. Jessica leaned forward, desperate. Do you have enough? Laura shook her head. Not yet. But close. Her eyes flicked to me. The gala this weekend. Turner's throwing it for the foundation. All his allies will be there. If we leak even part of this in that room, he won't be able to bury it. Jessica paled. Go into his world? Surrounded by his people? That's suicide. Laura's mouth twisted. Sometimes the only way to beat a lion is to drag him into the light. I looked at George's photo propped on the counter. His eyes seemed to follow me, steady, demanding. I turned back, my voice steel. Then we go to the gala. That night, as Jessica tried to sleep, I sat awake by the window. The street was quiet, but I knew eyes were watching. George had once promised me safety, a life built on honesty. And now here I was, preparing to walk into the lion's den with nothing but scraps of paper and a daughter-in-law who once hated me. But I wasn't afraid anymore. They had taken my home, my family, my peace. Now I would take the truth. The week passed like a storm brewing on the horizon. Jessica barely ate, barely slept. She sat by the window most nights, her eyes darting every time headlights passed on Pine Street. I couldn't blame her. The black car had returned twice, idling at the corner before vanishing into the dark. They're watching us, she whispered. They're waiting for us to make a mistake. I placed my hand over hers. Then we won't. We'll be ready. Laura came every evening, spreading more papers across the table. She worked like a soldier sharpening her blade before battle. This gala is our chance, she said. The state attorney will be there. If we can slip him the right files, bank records, the letter, we can't be ignored. Jessica's voice trembled. And if Turner catches us first? Laura met her eyes without flinching. Then we don't walk out. The silence that followed was heavy. But I saw something shift in Jessica. She wasn't the spoiled woman who had once thrown me out. She was scared, yes, but also determined. On the third night there was a knock at the door. Jessica froze. I opened it to find David standing there. My son. His face was drawn, his suit rumpled. But his eyes, cold, calculating, were not the eyes of the boy I had raised. Mom, he said quietly. We need to talk. Jessica stood rigid, anger flashing across her face. Now you want to talk? David ignored her. He looked only at me. Mom, I know what you're planning. Going to Briggs, digging into accounts. You need to stop. It's not safe. I clenched my fist. Not safe for who, David? For me or for you? His jaw tightened. This isn't what you think. Reed, he wasn't supposed to take everything. We had an agreement. Jessica gasped. So it's true. You helped him. David's face flickered with guilt before hardening again. I did what Dad couldn't. He was weak, too cautious. This town eats the cautious alive. Reed promised power. Turner promised protection. You don't understand, Mom. This is bigger than us. My voice shook with fury. Your father wasn't weak. He was decent. And you betrayed him. For a moment, David's mask slipped. His eyes glistened, almost boyish, almost mine. Then he straightened. If you walk into that gala, you'll ruin everything. And they won't hesitate to bury you for it. Please, just stay out of it. When I didn't answer, he turned on his heel and left without another word. Jessica sank into a chair, her whole body trembling. Helen, he's lost. He chose them. I swallowed hard, tears burning my eyes. Then we'll face him with the truth. No matter how much it hurts. The night before the gala, I stood in front of the cracked mirror in the apartment, wearing the only black dress I had left. Jessica appeared behind me, her makeup soft, her hair pulled back. She looked younger, vulnerable, but there was steel in her eyes. We walk in together, she said. Yes, I replied. Together. As midnight fell, Laura spread the final files across the table. Tomorrow, she said quietly, you step into the lion's den. Once we cross that line, there's no going back. I looked at Jessica, then at George's photo. No, I said firmly. There's no going back already. The ballroom held its breath. Turner's voice had sliced through the chatter, pinning me in place like prey under a hawk's gaze. Tell us, Helen, he drawled, smile sharp. What business does the poor widow have here among kings? Laughter rippled through the crowd, thin, uneasy. Every eye turned to me. I could feel Jessica trembling beside me, clutching my sleeve. For a moment I almost faltered. But then my hand brushed the envelope, the proof that George hadn't betrayed me, that my son had. I stepped forward. My voice was steady. I came to tell the truth. The words echoed, startling in the silence. Turner's smile faltered just a fraction. Truth? He repeated, almost amused. Yes, I said firmly, holding up the envelope. This letter proves George's will was forged. It proves Michael Reed and David conspired to steal $35 million. And it proves you, Richard Turner, stood behind them. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads turned toward David. His face went pale, his glass shaking in his hand. Turner chuckled low, but his eyes were knives. Forgery? Conspiracy? My dear, grief has made you desperate. Who here would believe the ramblings of a bitter widow? But then Laura's voice rang out, sharp and unyielding. I would. She stepped forward, slamming a folder onto a nearby table. Papers spilled out. Bank transfers, shell companies, property deals. These records tie Reed directly to Turner accounts. And here, she held up a page, is the connection to David Parker. The crowd surged with whispers, cameras flashing. The state attorney pushed through, his eyes narrowing at the evidence. Turner's mask cracked. His smile twisted, brittle. You think pieces of paper will save you? He snapped. I own this town. These people owe me their lives. Who do you think they'll stand with? me or a woman who can't even keep her family together. His words landed like a slap. But I lifted my chin. They'll stand with the truth. Because even if you bury me, Richard, the truth will outlive you. For a moment the world seemed to still. Turner's face darkened, the charming facade gone. He stepped closer, his voice a hiss only I could hear. You don't understand the price of defiance. Graves are cheaper than justice. Before I could answer, Jessica's voice rang out, clear, defiant. You ruined me, Richard. Used me. And I won't be silent anymore. Gasps again. For the first time, Jessica didn't look fragile or broken. She looked strong. The state attorney raised his hand. Mr. Turner, I'll need you to come with me. And you too, Mr. Parker. David staggered, his face ashen. No, wait, this isn't. But the room erupted. Reporters snapping photos, guests murmuring, some already stepping away from Turner like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Turner's roar cut through the chaos. This isn't over. Do you hear me? Not by a long shot. Security surged in, but Turner's glare found me, burning like fire. You'll regret this, Helen, he spat, his voice shaking with rage. I stood tall, though my heart pounded. Maybe. But at least George can rest knowing the truth is finally spoken. The crowd swallowed us, the attorney gathering the files, Turner shouting, David pale as death. And in that storm of light and noise, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Hope. Fragile, trembling, but real. The ballroom held its breath. Turner's voice had sliced through the chatter, pinning me in place like prey under a hawk's gaze. Tell us, Helen, he drawled, smile sharp. What business does the poor widow have here among kings? Laughter rippled through the crowd, thin, uneasy. Every eye turned to me. I could feel Jessica trembling beside me, clutching my sleeve. For a moment I almost faltered. But then my hand brushed the envelope, the proof that George hadn't betrayed me, that my son had. I stepped forward. My voice was steady. I came to tell the truth. The words echoed, startling in the silence. Turner's smile faltered just a fraction. Truth? He repeated, almost amused. Yes, I said firmly, holding up the envelope. This letter proves George's will was forged. It proves Michael Reed and David conspired to steal $35 million. And it proves you, Richard Turner, stood behind them. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Heads turned toward David. His face went pale, his glass shaking in his hand. Turner chuckled low, but his eyes were knives. Forgery? Conspiracy? My dear, grief has made you desperate. Who here would believe the ramblings of a bitter widow? But then Laura's voice rang out, sharp and unyielding. I would. She stepped forward, slamming a folder onto a nearby table. Papers spilled out. Bank transfers, shell companies, property deals. These records tie Reed directly to Turner accounts. And here, she held up a page, is the connection to David Parker. The crowd surged with whispers, cameras flashing. The state attorney pushed through, his eyes narrowing at the evidence. Turner's mask cracked. His smile twisted, brittle. You think pieces of paper will save you? He snapped. I own this town. These people owe me their lives. Who do you think they'll stand with, me or a woman who can't even keep her family together? His words landed like a slap. But I lifted my chin. They'll stand with the truth. Because even if you bury me, Richard, the truth will outlive you. For a moment the world seemed to still. Turner's face darkened, the charming facade gone. He stepped closer, his voice a hiss only I could hear. You don't understand the price of defiance. Graves are cheaper than justice. Before I could answer, Jessica's voice rang out, clear, defiant. You ruined me, Richard. Used me. And I won't be silent anymore. Gasps again. For the first time, Jessica didn't look fragile or broken. She looked strong. The state attorney raised his hand. Mr. Turner, I'll need you to come with me. And you too, Mr. Parker. David staggered, his face ashen. No, wait, this isn't. But the room erupted. Reporters snapping photos, guests murmuring, some already stepping away from Turner like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Turner's roar cut through the chaos. This isn't over. Do you hear me? Not by a long shot. Security surged in, but Turner's glare found me, burning like fire. You'll regret this, Helen, he spat, his voice shaking with rage. I stood tall, though my heart pounded. Maybe. But at least George can rest knowing the truth is finally spoken. The crowd swallowed us, the attorney gathering the files, Turner shouting, David pale as death. And in that storm of light and noise, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Hope. Fragile, trembling, but real. The gala ended in chaos. Turner was escorted out, shouting threats, David trailing behind with a face as pale as chalk. Reporters swarmed, cameras flashed, and Laura shoved us through a side exit before the crowd could crush us. On the street outside, Jessica exhaled shakily. We did it. He's finished. I wanted to believe her. But in my gut I knew better. Men like Richard Turner didn't fall quietly. That night, back at Pine Street, the silence felt heavy, unnatural. I sat by the window, staring at the dark street. Jessica drifted in and out of sleep, her body tense even in rest. Then headlights flared. A car idled at the curb, black, tinted windows. The same car we'd seen before. My chest tightened. Moments later, a brick crashed through the window, shattering glass across the room. Jessica screamed. I dragged her down to the floor as the brick rolled, a note tied to it. With shaking hands I untied the string. The words were scrawled in black ink. You embarrassed me. Now I'll take what's left of you. Jessica clutched my arm, her face white. Helen, he's coming for us. I pulled her close, steadying my voice. Then let him. He's already lost. Desperate men strike hardest when they know their time is over. The next day Laura came with grim news. Turner posted bail. He's out. And rumor is he wants to make an example of you. Jessica's voice cracked. We need to run. Leave town. I shook my head. Running won't stop him. If we run he wins. We stand our ground. That evening as I walked home from the market, the street was too quiet. No children playing, no neighbors on porches. Then I heard it, footsteps behind me. I turned. David. His eyes were wild, his hair disheveled. Mom, please. You have to stop. You don't understand. Turner doesn't forgive. If you keep pushing, he'll kill you. My voice broke. David, it's too late. The truth is already out. Why are you still protecting him? Tears welled in his eyes. Because without him I have nothing. Don't you see? I was never good enough for Dad. And you always looked at me like I'd never measure up. Turner gave me power. Respect. I stepped closer, reaching for him. David, I never wanted power. I just wanted my son. Please come back to me. For a heartbeat his face softened. Then a car screeched around the corner. Turner's men. David flinched, then shoved me back. Go, Mom, he shouted. Now. They came fast, 2 men in dark suits, guns flashing in the streetlight. I stumbled, falling against the pavement. A shot rang out. Jessica screamed from the doorway. When I looked up, David was on the ground. Blood spreading across his shirt. His eyes wide, breath shallow. I crawled to him, tears streaming. David, hold on. He looked at me, his lips trembling. I'm sorry, Mom. I just wanted to make you proud. Then his chest stilled. Jessica pulled me back, sobbing. The men vanished into the night, their job done. I clutched David's lifeless hand, my heart shattering. My son, flawed, broken, corrupted, was still my son. And now he was gone. Turner had taken George. He had taken my home. And now he had taken David. But I swore into the night, with every ounce of grief burning in me. He would not take my soul. David's body was barely cold when the sirens wailed. Neighbors poured into the street, whispering, pointing, but their faces blurred through my tears. I knelt beside my son, clutching his hand until the officers pulled me back. He's gone, one of them said quietly. I already knew. Jessica held me as I shook, her own face streaked with tears. Helen, I'm so sorry. But sorrow hardened into something sharper. Turner had taken George, taken my home, and now he had taken David. This was no longer just about justice. It was about survival. The state attorney moved fast after the shooting. Laura's files and our letter were enough. Turner was arrested again, this time under federal charges. Fraud, conspiracy, racketeering. This time, Laura said grimly, he won't walk free. But victory felt hollow. I watched from the courthouse steps as Turner was dragged past reporters, his silver hair disheveled, his smile gone. He turned his eyes to me, and even in handcuffs, his voice carried. You destroyed your own blood, Helen. Remember that. The trial that followed was swift, brutal. Michael Reed was found hiding in another state, dragged back in chains. Together, he and Turner faced the weight of their crimes. But David wasn't there to face it with them. Every headline, every photograph reminded me of the son I had lost, not just to death but to greed long before the bullet. Jessica changed after that night. The arrogance, the entitlement, it vanished. She moved back into the Pine Street apartment with me, cooking dinners, folding laundry almost like a daughter. One evening she set George's photo on the table and whispered, "I don't deserve forgiveness, Helen, but I want to try. For you. For David." Her tears fell freely. For the first time I believed her. The verdict came on a gray morning. Turner, guilty. Reed, guilty. Sentences long enough that neither would ever breathe free air again. When the gavel struck, I felt no triumph. Only exhaustion. Jessica squeezed my hand. "It's over." I shook my head softly. "No. Nothing's over. George is gone. David is gone. Nothing brings them back." Her voice broke. "Then what do we do?" I looked at her, the woman who had once been my enemy, now the only family I had left. "We live," I said. "We live the way they couldn't." Weeks passed. The roses on Maple Street bloomed without me. I never went back. Some ghosts are too heavy to face. Instead, I planted new ones outside the Pine Street apartment. Not as grand, not as many, but mine. Neighbors still whispered. Some with pity, some with admiration. But I no longer cared. At night, I lit a candle by George's photo, placing David's watch beside it. "I kept my promise," I whispered into the flickering flame. "The truth is out. They paid the price. But oh, George, the cost was too high." One evening, Jessica joined me at the table. She looked older, softer, her hands steady as she poured us both tea. "Do you think David knew at the end?" she asked quietly. "That you loved him?" Tears blurred my vision. "Yes. I think he finally did." We sat in silence, two women bound not by choice but by loss, sipping tea as the candle burned low. And for the first time in months I felt the faintest spark of peace. Not happiness, not yet. But the beginning of it. Because in the end the money was gone, the house was gone, but the truth had survived. And sometimes that has to be enough.